At the beginning of the movie, we see Siena seated at a bus stop. An elderly woman joins her and starts talking to her, after which she says she has to go. However, just as she leaves, Siena notices a ghostly figure nearby. The apparition gestures towards the elderly woman, who moments later is struck by a truck. Next, we learn that Siena can see when people are going to die, and it troubles her a lot. Every time she sees someone's death coming, she feels upset because she can't do anything to stop it, and this ability has changed her life completely. Afterward, Siena is with her friend Windy when their teacher Naya joins them, and only then a man interrupts them, asking Naya for help, claiming that Laras told him she could help him. Just then, Rio arrives and drives the man away, and then he informs Naya that the man has been appearing on campus lately, but Naya claims not to know who he is. Later on, Naya talks to Siena about how life and death are determined by a higher power and can be caused by many things, whether from outside or within, and she asks whether they should be afraid if death is destined. Siena responds that she's still frightened because seeing the sign of death on someone feels like a haunting memory that stays with her. Naya hands Siena a book about the perception of death, hoping it might help her. She then inquires if she is still taking medication prescribed by Dr. Feely. Siena admits that despite the medication, she continues to experience nightmares. Their conversation is interrupted when Naya receives a call from Laras. After promising Siena they'll meet again at their next session, Naya turns her attention back to Laras on the phone. Laras questions Naya about the fulfillment of a promise, implying that Naya had assured her of some form of help. Outside, Siena's attention is caught by the mysterious man who starts staring at her, causing her unease. Just then, Windy startles her, breaking the moment, and they leave the area together. Later on, the mysterious man is in the washroom when he starts to hear a disturbing noise. After a while, as the noise fades away, a ghost appears behind him for a brief moment before vanishing. Terrified, the man tries to escape, but is confronted by another entity moving towards him. Meanwhile, Siena and her friends hear a commotion from outside. Curious, they go to check and find the man standing on the balcony of the second floor. Despite Siena's assurance that he won't jump, the man leaps off the balcony, resulting in his death. Sometime later, Siena observes Naya quickly leaving the scene. She follows Naya and confronts her, mentioning that she didn't see any sign of death on the man, and questioning if she knew who he was. Naya denies knowing him and asks her, does she thinks this is only a matter of when she can see someone's going to die? She asks, isn't that what she wants? Not knowing when someone is going to die. Naya then asks her to leave, saying she just wants to be alone. That night, Siena experiences another nightmare where she sees the man who committed suicide on the campus, and to her horror, she finds Naya next to him. The following day, upon arriving at the campus, Siena finds out that Naya has taken leave because she is accompanying the body of the man who died the day before, as he was from her village. Siena, concerned that Naya might be in trouble, decides to visit her village to offer help, and when Rio suggests she doesn't need to panic, Siena opens up about her unique ability to foresee someone's death since high school. Rio is skeptical and doesn't believe her, to which Siena says she is serious, and it doesn't matter to her whether he believes it or not. Concerned for her safety, Rio decides to accompany Siena on the trip to Naya's village, and Windy joins them as well, and together, they set out on the journey to offer support to Naya. As they arrive outside Remetuk Village, Siena, Rio, and Windy witness locals carrying Sino's body out of the village. They learn from a local that Sino was an elementary teacher, but he was a bit disturbed, and when they discover that the trio intends to enter Remetuk Village, they caution them that during the harvest season, the village is typically closed off as the villagers fear stepping on the land, believing it to be inauspicious. However, their rice tastes best. Despite the warning, Siena, Rio, and Windy decide to enter anyway, and they make their way through the rice fields until they finally reach a community where villagers are engaged in their work. Naya is surprised to see them in the village and asks why they're here. Windy explains they came looking for her because Siena was concerned for her. Just then, Laras approaches, and Naya introduces her to the group, but Laras sternly informs them that the village is not open to tourists, especially during the ritual period when no one is allowed to enter or leave the village. Suddenly, a man and a boy lose control, and the man lands on a garden fork, and all three of them get shocked when he hits his head on a nail. But they are even more surprised when the villagers take this event absolutely normally. Naya convinces Laras that the three of them will stay with her at her house, and it's revealed that Naya is running a campaign in the village to raise awareness that suicide is not a solution for the villagers. But apart from Laras, not a single person in the village is in her support. Later, Laras invites them to join the pre-harvest feast that evening, explaining that being alone too often in the village increases one's susceptibility to death. As they proceed, Windy hears the same sound that Seno heard before his death. That evening, Naya asks Siena if she still experiences nightmares, to which she responds that she does occasionally, but she hasn't had any visions since arriving here. Meanwhile, Windy listens in on their conversation, and Naya questions Siena about whether isn't it what she wants, or if she doesn't feel normal because of that, and she is worried now. Just then, Laras arrives and calls Naya outside. Meanwhile, Windy, seemingly not in her right mind, grabs a knife and something moves swiftly from behind her. Suddenly, Siena and Ryo interrupt her, and when Siena asks if she's going to join them for the feast, Windy declines, saying she's tired and prefers to rest. As they all head off to the feast, Siena asks Ryo if they should go back for Windy, to which he suggests giving her some space, expressing concern that they might only bother her further. As they continue on their way, Siena notices an old woman named Rati caring for her grandson Bimo. Meanwhile, Windy writes a post, expressing her feelings of loneliness, stating that there is no one she can rely on other than herself, and suddenly she is attacked by a ghost. On the other hand, Ryo remarks on how delicious the rice tastes. Just then, Ratij also comes there, and Siena senses something odd after her arrival. Suddenly, Ryo notices Windy outside, looking frightened and running from something. After a while, the ghost attacks Windy, attempting to strangle her. But just in time, Ryo intervenes and prevents Windy from harming herself. And when Siena arrives, Windy flees into Reishi's house. Confused and frightened, Siena and Ryo enter the house in search of Windy. Inside, Siena finds Bimo sitting alone, and as she approaches him, he suddenly falls to the ground, and upon closer inspection, Siena is horrified to discover that the boy's mouth is stitched shut. Just then, Windy comes there, and Siena asks her about what's going on, but suddenly, the ghost haunts her. Hearing her scream, Rati rushes to her house, urging them to leave. However, behind Rati, the village head Ramat and villagers also arrive at the scene, and when Ramat checks Bimo, Rati insists that he is merely sleeping and requests not to be disturbed. However, Ramat senses that it's a suicide and instructs two villagers to bring the deceased boy to the meeting hall. Later, as Ramat performs the final rites for Bimo, Siena tells Ryo that it's weird that since she got here, she has not seen any signs of death on them. Suddenly, Ratish rushes in, screaming that Bimo was not a sacrifice, but just a child. At that moment, Siena notices a man standing apart from the crowd, but when she looks again, he has vanished. Windy becomes frightened witnessing the chaotic scene, and she notices a mark on her wrist, and this triggers a memory of seeing a similar mark on Sino's hand as well. After burying Bimo, the villagers begin to leave the site. However, Rati gets horrified to see two demonic hands emerging from beneath the ground. Later, Windy attempts to remove the mark from her hand, but is unsuccessful. She then immerses her head in the water. However, she gets horrified to see a ghost in there, and after a struggle manages to pull herself out. Meanwhile, Laras confronts Ramat, expressing concern about the ongoing deaths and questioning if it's because of the curse. Ramat questions why she brought that woman to the village, accusing her of being a cause of death as well. Laras questions Ramat about his actions as the village head, to which he defensively responds by asking if it's his fault. He asserts that neither Naya nor Laras can help them, suggesting that perhaps something needs to be sacrificed. He further asks her if she was able to save her brother and mother. This angers Laras, causing her to lash out and break a glass in frustration. After calming down, Laras starts to pick up the broken glass pieces. However, she soon senses someone approaching and is suddenly haunted by a ghost. The ghost grabs a piece of glass and begins cutting Laras's face, But when Remetuk comes out, he discovers Laras seemingly cutting her own face, prompting him to immediately intervene and help bring her back to her senses. Meanwhile, Siena asks Windy to tell her if something is troubling her, to which Windy says as if she tells her if something is troubling her. Finding Windy's behavior odd, Siena approaches her, but becomes frightened when she sees a ghost in the mirror instead of Windy. But Windy asks what's wrong with her. The next day, Siena and the others witness Remetuk and the villagers performing a ritual for the prosperity of their village. Laras urges them to join in, explaining that they believe more deaths will occur if they don't participate. Ryo questions why the villagers seem happy when they buried someone yesterday, to which Naya explains that they prefer celebrating fertile land and abundant harvests rather than mourning the dead, and Laras adds that, according to their beliefs, more deaths mean more fertile land. Afterward, they arrive at the village barn, where Ryo, while recording the event, notices a strange scarecrow, visible only through the camera lens, and as he focuses on it, the entity within the scarecrow startles him. After some time, Rati also spots the entity among the villagers. Terrified, she begins waving a sickle in the air, but the entity approaches her and forces her to slit her own throat. Later, Windy says she can't be here any longer and blames Siena for everything that has happened. She says she followed her here just to be a good friend, but now it's all useless. After this, she leaves there and Ryo and Siena also follow her. Remetuk arrives and informs Laras that the kids have stepped on the cursed land, indicating that they can never leave. Meanwhile, Ryo and Siena, attempting to stop Windy, notice that they keep returning to the same location no matter how far they chase her. They bring her back home, and while Siena stays with Windy, Ryo checks the footage in his camera. To his horror, he sees that entity killing Rati and realizes that they all didn't kill themselves. Knowing this, Ryo becomes deeply worried, and as he reaches for his camera, he is startled to see the entity in front of him. Suddenly, the entity attacks him, causing a glass to break, and then the entity grabs a glass shard and begins cutting his face. However, Siena intervenes just in time, stopping Ryo and bringing him back to his senses. Terrified, Ryo insists that a woman attacked him and asserts that none of them committed suicide. Later, Siena tells Naya that when Rati died yesterday, she couldn't see anything. And now, as everyone is hurting themselves, she feels helpless because she can't see anything. Siena asks Naya about the woman who attacked Ryo and inquires if she knows what happened in the village. Naya shows Siena a photo and explains that it features herself, Laras, and Laras's older brother, Abdu. They grew up in the village and were best friends. Despite the prosperity and fertility of their land, the curse always loomed over them. They were taught not to talk about it and not to care. Abdu had feelings for her, but she only saw him as a friend. One day, they discovered Abdu's lifeless body hanging in the village barn. The villagers blamed Naya for his death, and, in an attempt to prove that the curse wasn't real, Naya left the village and studied at a university in Jakarta. She even invited Laras to study human psychology with her, but Laras had to return home. Despite leaving the village, tragedy continued to strike Naya's family members, one by one. She may have been running away all this time, but now she realizes she can't change anything in the village, and she can't run away elsewhere. Naya then reveals that she has seen the woman. Siena asks if she has ever heard a buzzing sound, to which Naya says yes, and adds that they cannot escape death. Siena acknowledges that no one can escape death, but suggests that perhaps they can encounter the woman if they have a desire for death. She asks if she knows of any way to prevent having the desire for death. Naya responds that when someone is nearing death, they often have negative thoughts that lead them towards death. However, that death can be prevented by cultivating thoughts of genuine happiness, not artificial happiness like the villagers here. Later that night, Siena hears someone chanting a spell. Curious, she investigates outside and discovers the mysterious man performing a ritual. Intrigued, she follows him to his hut, where he tells her that he is Rajaman and reveals that their land wasn't always fertile. When Remetuk and he were young, Remetuk's father, the village head at the time, had to take action, and the villagers thought to sacrifice one life for others to live. He shows her scratch marks on his body, explaining that the entity often visits him and has long been a curse to their village, and she entices them to die. Then, he expresses his belief that she has experienced death herself. Siena confirms this, but adds that she was given the chance to return to life. However, she has her own curse of knowing when someone is going to die. The man suggests that her ability to see death and return from it isn't about accepting fate. Siena then reveals that she can't see anything anymore since arriving there, to which the man says this is because she is afraid of death. He explains that only those who fear death can see the entity and emphasizes that they all need someone like her. On the other hand, Naya finds herself in the barn, where she encounters Senyo, who blames her for their deaths, accusing her of causing them with her promises and lies. She denies being a murderer, but Senyo insists that she deserves to die. He then puts a noose around her neck, and we see the entity strangling Naya, ultimately killing her. After a while, when Siena returns home, she is shocked to see Naya's lifeless body hanging there. The next day, as Remetuk and the villagers take away Naya's dead body, Siena, deeply saddened by her friend's death, takes out some medicines from her bag and consumes them in excess. Soon after, she begins to hear those strange noises, and the entity manifests itself, crawling towards her. The entity grabs more pills from the bed and forcibly feeds her, and as a result, Siena becomes unconscious and collapses onto her bed. She then awakens in another location, where she witnesses the villagers forcibly taking Seker's daughter for sacrifice. They lock her in the village barn, and when the girl attempts to escape, the villagers chase her down and capture her, ultimately killing her. The following day, her lifeless body is hung in a field, resembling a scarecrow. This sight prompts Seker to perform a ritual, cursing the villagers, that while their land will remain fertile as they desire, the people will face death. Everything that comes from this land, those who step on it, and everyone who is buried inside this land will replace everything that grows on this land. And as long as they still use their harvest, death will come to them one by one. After Seker's death, the ghost of her daughter appears in front of Siena, and before she can comprehend the situation, the ghost attacks and tries to kill her. Fortunately, Ryo and Windy arrive just in time to find Siena unconscious on the bed. They attempt to revive her, and Siena recalls the happy moments she shared with her friends, and remembers Naya's words about preventing death with thoughts of happiness. With this realization, she fights back and regains consciousness, spilling out the pills. Meanwhile, the villagers take Naya's lifeless body to the barn, and Remetuk expresses a sentiment of reaching the culmination of this year's ritual, hoping that they can maintain this happiness until the next year. On the other hand, Siena informs her friends that these are not ordinary suicides, and she can finally see her. Just then, Ryo notices Windy grabbing a knife and intervenes before she can harm herself. Windy, in distress, runs screaming to the village barn, with Ryo following closely to tend to her, but she accuses the villagers of being at fault. Meanwhile, when Siena attempts to leave, the door abruptly slams shut, trapping her inside. Suddenly, the entity launches an attack, grabbing hold of Siena and attempting to climb the wall with her. Siena manages to free herself, but as she tries to escape, the entity grabs her once more, preventing her from fleeing. However, when Siena says she is not scared of her, the entity vanishes from there. Amidst the chaos, everyone in the village begins hearing the disturbing noise. Rajaman confronts Rama, accusing him and his family of causing the turmoil. He expresses his disregard, stating that Rama doesn't even care about his own son's death. Laras then approaches them and asks, what should they do now? To which Rajaman says her father has always known what needs to be done. In the meantime, the entity attacks and tries to kill Ryo. However, Siena arrives just in time and reminds Ryo of their cherished memories and the strong bond they share. Her words snap Ryo out of his trance-like state, and together, they rush to Windy and try to wake her up. Overwhelmed and confused, Siena screams loudly, causing the disturbing noise to abruptly stop. However, by the time Laras hangs herself, Remetuk and the villagers rush in to save Laras, quickly bringing her down from where she hangs. And Remetuk solemnly declares that the villagers cannot continue to pay for their past mistakes, and he resolves to let the land remain dry. In a drastic decision to stop the curse, Remetuk chooses to sacrifice himself along with the produce, igniting the barn in flames. Now, after a few days, Siena and her friends come back to Jakarta and start living a normal life. However, with the return of the next harvest season, The cursed cycle reawakens as the villagers begin collecting the crops once more, and tragically, Windy succumbs to the influence of the curse, taking her own life by stabbing a knife into her eye. Thanks for facing the frights with us. If you survived this video, drop a like, summon that subscribe button, and brace yourself for more horror. Until next time, stay spooked.